What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you with a early look at some sleepers for redraft season-long fantasy football. We're coming at you today with 4 guys that we think are going way too low. We're using Underdog ADP round 9 or later, so some guys that are going a bit later in drafts that you can be targeting in Underdog drafts, or you can be targeting in your season-long drafts once they come around. So, Danny, how are you doing today?
Doing well, and as always, we're coming at you with a jam-packed offseason of content. We talked about Dynasty all up until now. Well, let's get into some redraft. Let's get into some Underdog ADP and talk about these guys, because quite frankly, if you're on Underdog right now, you can absolutely abuse some of the current ADPs on that platform because it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, and even if you're doing mock drafts for your season-long draft, like maybe you're like me and you know where you're going to be drafting, and you know that some of these guys are just going way too late. So if you guys enjoy this video at any point, hit the like button, helps us out tremendously. Lets YouTube know that you guys enjoy our videos. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We are just over 3,300 subscribers right now, trying to get to that 3,500 mark by the end of the month. So appreciate if you guys could help us get there, and comment any of your thoughts down below. So we're going to hit the intro and we're going to get into the first guy. All right, so the first guy that we're going to be talking about is a guy that a lot of people have probably forgotten about by now. He was once a very young, very exciting young fantasy receiver that a lot of people were excited about back in 2018. But Mike Williams is the first guy that we're going to be talking about, currently being drafted at the 901 in Underdog drafts. I think he's going a bit later than that. Every draft that I've been in, he's more of like a mid-10th round pick. So when you look at Mike Williams, when he's on the field, he was actually better this past year than a lot of people probably think. If you remove the 2 games that he left early in, because he's Mike Williams, he gets injured in games, he averaged 12.23 PPR points per game, had almost 4 receptions and 7 targets a game, 60 yards or so. If you pace those numbers out, you're looking at 109 targets, 60 receptions, 956 yards, and 7 touchdowns, which would have been the wide receiver 18 in points per game. And then you add on to the fact that he actually did perform on the field last year. If you project this situation going forward, it should be more consistent for fantasy. The Los Angeles Chargers, they only scored the 19th most points in the NFL last year and were about league average in DVOA. The passing volume was high for the offense, but the efficiency should improve when you take into account that Austin Eckler was out most of the year. He wasn't healthy at all. They now have a first-round left tackle manning the blind side of Justin Herbert, and hopefully we can see an improvement from the reigning offensive rookie of the year in Justin Herbert. And on top of all of this, we have Hunter Henry, who's now departed in free agency for the New England Patriots, which vacates that primary red zone role that we know Mike Williams has been capable of locking down in the past. We saw in 2018, he scored 10 receiving touchdowns and was wide receiver 24 in fantasy, despite only seeing 66 targets that year.
Yeah, no, definitely. When you're talking about Mike Williams, for the longest time we've known when this guy is on the field, he is a dynamic touchdown scorer, downfield threat. And quite frankly, we have not seen him with a quarterback for a long sustained period of time that we've seen from Justin Herbert. I mean, even though in those 12 games just last year, just as a rookie, we were able to see Justin Herbert really extrapolate this guy's value. You mentioned a top 25 or top 20 points per game receiver, despite not really relying on that high volume. If we're talking about an offense that can take that next step into that top 5, top 8 type area, it's not just going to be Keenan Allen. It's not just going to be Austin Eckler. There's going to be a tertiary option that emerges. And from a talent standpoint, you're talking about a 6'4", 220-pound downfield receiver who can really work in unison with what Justin Herbert provides as a deep ball type thrower, arm talent out of the wazoo. And that really fits what Mike Williams does well. So overall, I mean, you're mentioning 9th round ADP, probably going to get him around the 10th round, to be honest, in most of your drafts, especially, again, if you're in best ball specifically. I know we're talking about redraft right now. If you're in best ball specifically and you lock up Justin Herbert in the 6th round, Mike Williams needs to be on your best ball teams. And you're getting him at this cheap of value currently is just, it's money in the bank.
Right. And when you talk about even in Dynasty too, this is a guy that everybody has given up on, right? This is a guy that nobody wants. He's kind of just, thrown aside to the curb. Nobody really cares about him anymore. And that was the case last year with a guy like Corey Davis and even a guy like Will Fuller. So those guys, we saw them in their contract years, which I would remind you that Mike Williams is also in this year. It wouldn't shock me if he could finally put it all together, stay healthy for a year, and ball out like Corey Davis and Will Fuller did last year. So I think this is a guy that's going totally under the radar, especially in redraft leagues. If you're in a more casual league, this is a guy that's going to go like very, very late because everyone's just going to write him off. They know what he's been the past couple of years, and they're not willing to project forward instead of look, into the past and see what has happened already. And like we said, this all is going to hinge probably on how good Justin Herbert is. And we both very much believe in Justin Herbert. And like Danny said, they threw the ball like over 600 times last year. Keenan Allen's probably going to get 160, 170 targets, which is a lot of volume for a receiver. Austin Eckler probably about 100 targets out of the backfield. But after that, who else is getting targets in that offense? Is it going to be Jalen Guyton? Is Josh Palmer going to step in as a rookie and be that good? I don't think he will be. As much as I like Josh Palmer, he's always been more of a long-term play for me. So I think Mike Williams, especially this year, can come out and really make a name for himself and potentially get himself a big contract going forward from a dynasty perspective.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So going on to the next person that we're going to be talking about, you kind of briefly mentioned him and you talked about Mike Williams emerging as that alpha dog. You mentioned relating it to Corey Davis. Well, Corey Davis is going to be my guy because his current ADP on Underdog is absolutely asinine. You're talking about a guy who's going off at the 10:08, the wide receiver 47 off the board. Let's just talk about 2020 real quick. He broke the fuck out in 2020 after that down 2019 campaign where people really were writing him off. He had a good 2018, 2019. People got a sour taste in their mouths because they drafted him in the 4th round. And then last year, you got him in an extreme discount, and he only just balled out before free agency. He averaged nearly 71 yards per game, 0.4 touchdowns per game, and was on a near 1140 yard pace and 6 touchdown pace, despite having A.J. Brown in that offense on a low-volume passing team. Talking about a team that threw the ball the 30th most times in the league, so third least, if you will. He was super efficient, and he really showed the talent that made him that 5th overall pick in, 2017?
2017, yeah.
2017. He was the eighth in the league in yards per target, 4th in yards per route run, 6th in fantasy points per route run, and 19th in expected points added amongst the wide receiver position. And just this past season, in 14 games, he was the PPR wide receiver 30 on only a 6.6 target per game, 105 overall seasonal target pace. Now he signs an alpha-like contract. We're talking about a guy who signed for nearly $13 million for a year. 3 years, $37.5 million contract with the Jets this offseason on a team that just completely invested in a huge offensive rehaul. Talking about drafting their franchise quarterback at 2nd overall and really building their coaching staff from the ground up, including the hire of former 49ers assistant Mike LaFleur. This is a similar situation to what we were talking about last year. Volume versus efficiency perspective to a receiver who moved teams in the offseason. On the screen right now, you'll see Stephon Diggs splits from 2019 versus 2020. And when you're actually looking at his 2019 splits, they are nearly identical to what you can also see on the screen with Corey Davis's. You're talking about the PPR points per game, 14.51 for Diggs, 13.81 for Davis. Receptions per game, you're talking about 4.2 for Diggs, 4.64 for Davis. Touchdowns per game, nearly identical. Receiving yards and receiving targets, nearly identical as well. Am I calling Corey Davis Stephon Diggs from a talent standpoint? No, I don't think he can be the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 overall in fantasy. But are we talking about a guy who seemingly could improve given his talent, given his situation on more targets? Absolutely. I mean, this is a guaranteed smash to absolutely obliterate that 6.6 target per game pace that we saw in 2020. We all just want to project. We all just want to assume that the Jets will have a transition year on offense, similar to what people wanted to say about Josh Allen last year. Is Zach Wilson a better pure passer than what we thought Josh Allen was going into last year? I absolutely believe that to be the case. Now, nowadays, obviously not, because Josh Allen did take that step. But what's stopping us from really projecting Zach Wilson to come out and play well? Corey Davis to be his number 1 target? Because quite frankly, Corey Davis has the resume under his belt to really be that true alpha presence for Zach Wilson on a very young offense overall. So overall, I mean, at this point in the draft, you're talking about a guy who has 130 plus target upside with a quarterback I believe in, and you're getting him in the 10th round. There's just no reason why you shouldn't be drafting Corey Davis as the wide receiver 47 right now.
Right. And the perceived thing with Corey Davis too, he might be going off the board even later than this, right? Because everyone's going to see the Jets. They're going to be like, he's on the Jets. The Jets scored but they were dead last in points for last year. But I think the Jets are going to take a big step forward this year. I think they're not going to be a top 15 offense, but I think they're going to be, this 22nd best offense in the league. And the 22nd best offense in the league last year would have been about 120 more points for. than the Jets were last year because they were putrid on offense last year. So Corey Davis, it's possible that this guy just got better. Everyone's going to point to the fact that last time we saw this guy as a number one, he couldn't handle the pressure of number one corners and stuff. It's possible this guy just got better. He was a 5th overall pick. He went to Western Michigan. He wasn't a polished SEC Jamar Chase coming out of school. He was more of a project receiver, and we're potentially seeing a guy that took a big step forward. And when you talk about a tape perspective, if you looked at this guy play last year, he looked like a number one receiver. The way he was playing, he was a 10th graded receiver per PFF. He played very well. So this is a guy that I think is going underrated. He's going undervalued. And in terms of volume, like 120, 130 targets wouldn't shock me at all. This offense isn't going to run through Jamison Crowder the way it did with Adam Gase. That's not how Mike LaFleur is going to run his offense. And I think the creativity that he's going to bring in, Corey Davis should be able to, create some separation and be a safety blanket for his young quarterback, because we saw him do that last year for Ryan Tannehill. And part of the reason I'm scared for Ryan Tannehill this year is because I do think Corey Davis was that good last year. It wasn't just a matter of you lost your second target for Tennessee. You also lost a good second target.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. And when people just want to write him off, I point to the fact that you're just solely looking at the 2019 campaign to really have skepticism about Corey Davis. His second year in the league, he was a near 900-yard and 4-touchdown receiver. Last year, going into free agency, nearly 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns in those 14 games played. That one sour season is going to be the reason why he's going in the double-digit rounds, despite signing a near $13 million per year deal. It's just completely insane, in my opinion. You're getting a number one target on an offense that should improve with a system in general that should be able to get him the ball at least 130 plus times, as I already mentioned.
A system that will always elevate the play of everybody, despite, the talent around. Like Mike LaFleur and the San Francisco 49ers have made good offenses, good fantasy offenses out of Nick Mullins-led, quarterbacking with only Brandon Ayuk to throw to last year. Like, legitimately, they'll make a good offense out of anything. And I think the Jets have more talent right now than the decimated 49ers did last year. I think when you take all those factors in, I agree. Corey Davis, definitely a value. Let's move on to the next guy. And we're going to talk about a quarterback here that's going a little bit too late. And especially in best ball, where you probably need 2 to 3 quarterbacks, this is especially true. But Baker Mayfield, one at the 1209 to me, is just absolutely absurd value. And the reason I say that is because this offense is one that I want pieces in. I want pieces in it of the Browns offense, period, point blank. I already know what the concerns probably are for most people who don't like Baker Mayfield. They think the volume is low of the passing offense. They run the ball too much, and Baker Mayfield's a terrible quarterback, right? Mayfield was a terrible quarterback in 2019, right? He answered the bell last year. If he had a bad year last year, he probably would have been gone. They probably would have addressed the QB position at some point in free agency. Maybe they would have gone after like Matthew Stafford or something like that. But on the screen right now, you're going to see his efficiency metrics. You're going to see his productivity from what he was last year. This is a guy that ranked, top 12 in probably at least 75% of the metrics on the screen right now. When you're talking about air yards per attempt, adjusted yards per attempt, play action completion percentage, deep ball completion percentage. This is a guy that legitimately took a step forward in his career. And as you can see, he was a borderline top 10, top 15 quarterback at worst in the NFL last year. And yet he's going off the board as the QB 20, as the signal caller for what I think can be a top 5 to 10 offense in the NFL. And he's well protected. He has a fantastic scheme around him with Kevin Stefanski, and he has a lot of weapons. He goes, 6 deep at receiver? He's got Beckham, he's got Landry. Peoples-Jones showed a lot. They drafted Schwartz in the 3rd round this past year. Rashard Higgins is back. They have 2 good tight ends with Hooper and Bryant. He has 2 good running backs out of the backfield and one of the best offensive lines in football. The reason I expect this offense to take a big jump is due to the play of the Browns down the stretch. Following their Week 9 bye, they played like this monsoon game against Houston where the weather was just absolutely terrible in Week 10. But after that game, you saw this offense take a big-time leap. This should have been expected for them getting out to a slow start, given the COVID offseason, the fact that they had a new coaching staff. But from Week 11 on through their 2 playoff games, Baker Mayfield averaged nearly 8 yards per attempt, compared to the 6.9 that he averaged weeks 1 to 10. And from a volume perspective, we saw a big time shift in the Browns offense to more of a pass heavy approach. And this was actually weird considering the fact that Nick Chubb came back around this time.
Yeah, no, fully. I mean, this team just kind of showed what they were about. You mentioned the volume down the stretch. You mentioned the efficiency. You didn't even mention really like Baker as a player. Like yes, the numbers showed it as well, but you just watch this guy play. from the early to the later on season, you could tell he really felt comfortable. He really grew in that Stefanski system. And in general, we're talking about a guy who Kirk Cousins is a very comparable type of situation to him. Maybe, he struggled with what was happening before. It was kind of hard really to produce with Freddie Kitchens calling plays for you. Having Stefanski there to really alleviate and take the pressure off you, especially with the heavy play action, especially with the in general offensive personnel that he had available to him. He showed that he's an extendable type quarterback. That's hard to say, especially considering the fact that Browns fans earlier in the season, going into the season, were like, oh, we're not bringing this guy back on his fifth-year option. We're not going to re-sign this guy long-term. He really proved those doubters wrong down the stretch this year and showed that can he be that 30, 35 million per year type quarterback? I think he can. I think he can lead them to personal and team success. So overall, I absolutely agree. And talking about from a fantasy standpoint, the efficiency was just remarkable. Like the accuracy, the touchdowns, everything just improved down the stretch. And I do love Baker Mayfield. And you're mentioning he's currently going off the board close to the quarterback 20. Like it's just insane to think about. Who's currently going ahead of him? Like genuinely,
Tua?
That's
Tua's
insane.
Going ahead of, yeah. So when you actually look at his numbers, if you pace out those 9 games from week 11 to the 2 playoff games, they passed the ball 314 times, which is a pace of 558 pass attempts, which is about league average in terms of passing volume. So they did go to a more pass-heavy approach. And 4,200 yards, 27 passing touchdowns, about 208 rushing yards, and 2 touchdowns would have been the pace of his numbers week 11 to the 2 playoff games. And that would have equated to the QB 12 last year. So this is a QB for a top 12 scoring offense at absolute minimum. I think they can be a top 5 offense. And they always have upside to finish as a QB1. If you're the quarterback for a good offense, you always have upside. And at the very least, he's going to be a great streamer. And this offense can take a major step up. In year 2 with Kevin Stefanski, left tackle Jedrick Wills is going into his second season. Odell Beckham is returning from injury, which we haven't even talked about yet. Nick Chubb should be fully healthy this year. Donovan Peoples-Jones, Rashard Higgins, Anthony Schwartz, Harrison Bryant, Austin Hooper are all depth tertiary targets that are all fine. Jarvis Landry's still doing his thing. And with Schwartz, you got some speed in that offense, some potential for big plays. I think the Browns are in prime position to get out to a hot start, to be, 11, 12, 13 win type of team. And they start their schedule playing the Chiefs, Texans, Bears, Vikings, Chargers, and Cardinals. And that's a pretty easy stretch of games. That's a lot of below average total defenses when you talk about pass efficiency defenses. And some of these defenses got worse too, with the Chiefs, the Bears losing Kyle Fuller and some of those pieces that they lost. I think this is a team that can get out to a hot start. And at the very least, when you're talking about redraft, we're going to get into more of this strategy later in the offseason. But at the very least, if he gets out to a big start, you should be able to flip this dude or any of the pieces on the Browns offense if they get out to a hot start.
Absolutely agree. And we can briefly mention best ball too, but if you guys are taking your Nick Chubbs, you're taking your Kareem Hunts, you're taking your Odell Beckhams, this is one of the cheaper stacks that you could really complete. You get a Chubb. Okay, Chubb's the only expensive piece really there. Or if you wait, you get Hunt in the 5th round, Odell in the 6th, Baker in the 12th. That's absolutely money in the bank.
Wherever he's going to.
Absolute money in the bank. So overall, I do agree. Baker Mayfield near 13th round you mentioned is just absolutely insane. So next player we're going to be talking about is actually going to be Antonio Brown, wide receiver from your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You got the Evans in the background. Let's talk about another receiver on that team with AB. Currently going off the board at the 9-10 or the wide receiver 44. And I get it. He may not be that prime Pittsburgh Steelers Antonio Brown, 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns per year. But let's not take away the fact that this dude just straight produced for one of the highest volume passing offenses in the entire league last year, 6th in the NFL with nearly 40 pass attempts per game, and is still smooth as butter like always when it comes to separating from DBs. You talk about the 8 games he played last year after his suspension. He had 61 targets, 483 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns, or a 7.6 target, 60.3 receiving yard, and 0.5 touchdown per game pace, which extrapolated over a 16-game sample would be nearly 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. He is still hashtag good at football and benefits from an offense that should figure to be top 5 in the league in scoring. And if you're actually mentioning his averages last year, his 14.64 PPR points per game would have equated to a wide receiver 24 pace. And he's currently going off the board 20 wide receiver spots after that. And not to mention, this is baking in the fact that he was a wide receiver 24 pace with Godwin and Evans on the field. If anything were to happen, similar to what we saw from Godwin this year, he was banged up. We've seen Evans in the past deal with slight injuries. If anything were to happen to Evans or Godwin on any given week, AB has legitimate wide receiver 1 upside given the volume and the chemistry that we saw with Brady. I mean, it's not really too much to elaborate on. I can let you tag in a bit quick too, but you can secure AB as your wide receiver 4 or 5 on most of your squads right now, and that's just an absolute steal. I mean, you're talking about an absolute flex play. None really get better in terms of stability and upside than what we've seen from Brown, given the usage he got in his first year in Tampa Bay, despite being suspended for the first 8 games. So overall, people just want to point to it because it's trendy. Don't just expect massive regression from this guy because you want to. He's going to be good. He's going to be a wide receiver 3, and you're currently getting him off the board as a wide receiver 4 or 5 type value, which is just insane.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're going to see a situation this year. There's going to be a couple offenses that have 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers. We're going to see it in Pittsburgh. We're probably going to see it with your team in Dallas too. I think all 3 of these Buccaneers receivers are going to be top 36 options. And like you said, AB going at wide receiver 44, especially if you're in a best ball format and you never know when to play this guy, you don't have to worry about that in best ball. So he's a guy in best ball that I grab as my wide receiver 4 or 5 every single time because I know he's going to have 6 or 7 games where he produces like a wide receiver 1 or 2. And that's exactly what you want from a depth wide receiver 4 or 5, or a flex play in a redraft league. So I totally agree. I think he's completely undervalued. He should be going, in my opinion, around the areas of guys like, just after Chase Claypools and Cortland Suttons and stuff like that, where like Laviska Shenault is going, because he should be, a 7th, 8th round pick, because that's exactly where he's going to fit into your lineup. He's going to be a flex play. He's going to be wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on your team. And he's just going, about a round or 2 later than that. And at that point, he is definitely a value. And again, for best ball sakes, Tom Brady and Antonio Brown is one of the cheapest and most effective stacks that you can get. And you can even pair that with Gronk later on. And you got a stack of an offense that's going to be probably top 5 at minimum in scoring, and they could legitimately be the best offense in the league.
I fully agree. And you're talking about the volume as well, because people are going to just going to say, oh, how much volume is there going to be for the wide receiver 3? First of all, you hit it on the head. This is an offense where the wide receiver 3 is better than some teams' wide receiver 1s, and that's not exaggerating whatsoever. You're talking about a guy who had 3 games last year with 7 or more targets. With 7 or more targets for the wide receiver 3, quote unquote, he had 3 games out of 8 with 7 or more targets. It just goes to show that the involvement here is crazy. He had 2 games in the double digits, 13 targets and 14 targets. He's going to be involved. And the fact that you're getting that type of stability in the 9th round is just it's so easy. It's so easy. And you mentioned the best ball aspect. We're going to be talking about some stacks. We're going to be talking about some strategies later on in the offseason. You guys got to stay tuned for that. The current value of the Buck stack, talking about the Brady ADP, talking about Antonio Brown. We didn't even get into Godwin's or Evans, Fournette, Rojo, even Gronk. Like, it's just insane where you can get these guys currently for a team that just came off a Super Bowl win. So overall, I absolutely agree. Get Antonio Brown right now. It's just so easy.
Right. Yep. Totally agree. So if you guys enjoyed this video, we're going to be coming at you tomorrow with some early busts that we're going to be talking about, bringing you another 4 guys that are going a bit too high in ADP. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe, all the stuff I mentioned before. Our website should be back up and running. I know we had, a bit of a situation over the weekend, but we got it all straightened out. So if you guys want to head over to the website, you can check out the Underdog deal that's been rolling across the bottom of the screen right now. You can get both draft guides, $25 bonus to enter the Best Ball Mania 2 contest, totally for free. So make sure you guys check all that out. Peace out and enjoy your Tuesday.